Have you ever looked at old photographs and felt a strange sensation, as if something was wrong with what you were seeing? The eyes that don't quite match the smile, the posture that seems unnaturally rigid, or perhaps the subtle sense that the person in the image isn't who they claim to be. What would you do if you discovered that your entire family legacy was built on a monstrous deception, one so perfect that it remained hidden for generations? Before we continue with today's disturbing tale from America's shadowy past, I'd like to ask you to comment below telling us where you're watching from. This channel relies on your support to continue bringing these hidden historical horrors to light. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We need your help to keep uncovering the darkest secrets that some would prefer stay buried forever. In the autumn of 1894, the prosperous town of Elmwood, Missouri, stood as a monument to America's rapid westward expansion. Nestled alongside the Mississippi River, its stately mansions and thriving business district represented the pinnacle of Gilded Age prosperity. The town's most prominent families, the Blackwoods and the Carringtons, had amassed immense fortunes through railroads and timber, respectively. Their wealth and influence stretched far beyond Missouri's borders, reaching into the highest echelons of East Coast society. The patriarchs of both families, Jonathan Blackwood and Harrison Carrington, had each been blessed with a single son to carry on their legacies. William Blackwood and Theodore Carrington had been groomed from birth to assume control of their father's empires, their futures mapped out with meticulous precision. Their marriages would be the final piece in solidifying the family's positions in American aristocracy. It was therefore considered a stroke of extraordinary fortune when the Montgomery twins arrived in Elmwood in the spring of 1893. Daughters of a respected but financially diminished Virginia family, Eleanor and Catherine Montgomery possessed the pedigree, education, and social graces that made them ideal candidates for marriage into Elmwood's elite. With their identical heart-shaped faces, copper-colored hair, and poised demeanors, they quickly became the most sought-after young women in the region's social scene. What happened next would become the foundation of a horror that would echo through generations. From the official court records of Randolph County, Missouri, dated December 12, 1894, the marriages of William Blackwood to Eleanor Montgomery and Theodore Carrington to Catherine Montgomery were solemnized on June 4, 1894, at St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Elmwood, Missouri, with all legal requirements having been satisfied and witnesses present. 6 months later, both young women were with child. The future of both dynasties seemed secure. But beneath the veneer of this perfect social union lay a terrible secret, one that would not be uncovered until nearly a year after the double wedding ceremony that had been celebrated as the social event of the decade. Lillian Harris had served as lady's maid to both Montgomery twins since their arrival in Elmwood. Her sworn testimony, sealed by court order until 1967, reveals the first glimpse into the horrifying truth. "I knew them better than anyone. Better than their husbands, better than the townsfolk. When you dress someone, when you prepare their bath, when you hear their private conversations, you know them in ways others cannot. And I tell you now, under oath and before God, that they switched places. Not just once as a childish prank, but permanently. The one who married Mr. Blackwood was not Eleanor, but Catherine. And the one who married Mr. Carrington was not Catherine, but Eleanor. They orchestrated the most perfect deception, and I helped them do it." When questioned about why she participated in such a scheme, Harris's testimony becomes even more disturbing. They weren't right, those girls. They spoke to each other in whispers, finishing each other's sentences. Sometimes I'd enter a room and find them sitting perfectly still, staring at each other without blinking, as if engaged in some silent communication. They told me they had always been meant to live as the other, that since birth they had been given the wrong names, the wrong identities. They believed that by switching places, they were correcting a cosmic mistake. The discovery of this deception came in the most tragic of circumstances. On April 16, 1895, a fire broke out in the Carrington mansion. Theodore Carrington perished in the blaze, along with his 8-month pregnant wife, officially recorded as Catherine Montgomery Carrington. From the Elmwood Gazette, April 18, 1895. Our community is in mourning following the tragic fire at the Carrington estate. Mr. Theodore Carrington, age 25, and his wife, the former Miss Catherine Montgomery, age 20, both perished in the conflagration. Mrs. Carrington was in the advanced stages of pregnancy. The cause of the fire remains under investigation. What the newspaper did not report was the bizarre discovery made by the physician who examined the bodies. Dr. James Whitfield's private medical report, only unsealed in 1972, contains this chilling entry. Upon examination of the deceased Mrs. Carrington, I observed an unusual marking on the inside of her left wrist, a small star-shaped birthmark. Having previously attended to both Montgomery twins upon their arrival in Elmwood, I distinctly recall noting this exact marking on Miss Eleanor Montgomery, not Miss Catherine. This observation raises disturbing questions about the identity of the deceased. When this discrepancy was brought to the attention of William Blackwood, his reaction was one of disbelief and rage. He demanded immediate confirmation of his wife's identity. A confrontation ensued at the Blackwood mansion that would shake the foundations of Elmwood society. According to the household staff present that evening, William Blackwood stormed into his wife's private chambers, brandishing Dr. Whitfield's report. What transpired next is documented in the sworn statement of Martha Jenkins, head housekeeper of the Blackwood estate. Mr. Blackwood was in such a state as I'd never seen him. He demanded Mrs. Blackwood show him her wrists. She refused at first, backing away from him with such terror in her eyes. When he finally grabbed her arms and pushed up her sleeves, there was nothing there, no birthmark of any kind. Mr. Blackwood seemed to calm somewhat, but then Mrs. Blackwood said something I'll never forget as long as I live. She said, "We removed it. We knew someone might notice." The implications were staggering. If the woman who had died in the Carrington fire was actually Eleanor Montgomery, then the woman living as Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood was in fact Catherine Montgomery. The deception went beyond a simple prank or momentary identity swap. It had been a calculated, long-term plot. But why? What could possibly motivate two sisters to engage in such an elaborate deception? The answer emerged through a series of journals discovered hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the guest cottage, where the Montgomery twins had initially resided upon their arrival in Elmwood. These journals, written in a curious alternating pattern, with entries sometimes switching handwriting mid-sentence, painted a disturbing picture of two individuals who viewed themselves not as separate people, but as two halves of a single entity. From the Montgomery journals, date unknown, "We are not two, but one soul divided at birth into separate prisons of flesh. Eleanor is Catherine, and Catherine is Eleanor. The names are meaningless constructs imposed upon us by those who cannot understand our true nature. When we marry, we will correct this cosmic error. I will become her, and she will become me, and in this way we will be closer to wholeness." Another entry reads, "The men who court us see only our external features. They believe they can tell us apart, but they are fools. We have been practicing the switch since childhood. Mother could never tell when we traded places at the dinner table or during lessons. We have perfected the art of becoming the other. By the time we reach Missouri, we will be ready for the permanent exchange." Most disturbing of all was the revelation that the twins had specifically targeted the Blackwood and Carrington heirs after learning about their wealth and status from newspaper accounts. Their arrival in Elmwood had been no coincidence, but the culmination of months of planning. From a journal entry dated January 10th, 1893, "We have selected our marks. The Blackwood and Carrington fortunes will secure our future. Two young heirs, both unmarried, both desperate for wives of proper breeding. They will never suspect that the women they court are not who they claim to be. And once we are wed, once we carry their children, the transformation will be complete and irreversible." As the investigation deepened, authorities uncovered evidence suggesting that the Carrington fire may not have been accidental. Traces of kerosene were found in unusual locations throughout the mansion, and several servants reported that Mrs. Carrington had dismissed them early on the night of the fire, insisting on privacy. But the most chilling piece of evidence came from a letter found in the desk of Harrison Carrington, Theodore's father, dated just one day before the fire. It was written in what was later confirmed to be Eleanor Montgomery's handwriting, the woman who had been living as Catherine. "Dearest sister, the time has come for the next phase of our ascension. Theodore grows suspicious. Yesterday he called me Eleanor in a moment of confusion and watched my reaction too carefully. We cannot allow doubts to take root. Remember our pact. If one is discovered, both must transform. I will make my transition tomorrow night. Prepare yourself for what must follow. Remember, we are one soul. What happens to me is merely happening to another aspect of yourself. The children we carry are merely vessels for our continued existence. Soon we will achieve what no others have managed, true transcendence of individual identity. The reference to transformation and transition in the letter took on horrific significance in light of the fire that claimed 2 lives the very next day. But what did Eleanor mean by prepare yourself for what must follow? The answer would soon become apparent in the most ghastly manner imaginable. On May 2nd, 1895, William Blackwood summoned Dr. A. Whitfield to his home with urgent concerns about his wife's behavior. According to the doctor's records, Mrs. Blackwood, who was now strongly suspected to be Catherine Montgomery, had begun speaking in 2 distinct voices, sometimes in the middle of sentences, and referring to herself alternately as I and we. From Dr. Whitfield's medical notes, Mrs. Blackwood exhibits symptoms consistent with a severe dissociative state. She alternates between periods of perfect lucidity and episodes wherein she appears to be having conversations with an unseen presence she refers to as sister. Most disturbing is her insistence that her deceased twin has joined with her and now resides within her body alongside her unborn child. The psychological strain of her sister's death, combined with her advanced pregnancy, may account for this delusional state. William Blackwood, now aware of at least some portion of the deception that had been practiced upon him, nevertheless appeared determined to maintain appearances until the birth of his child. Private correspondence between Blackwood and his attorney reveals his plan. The situation, while deeply disturbing, must be managed with the utmost discretion. I cannot allow scandal to taint my family name or jeopardize my son's inheritance. I am convinced that the woman living as my wife is in fact Catherine Montgomery, who has engaged in an elaborate deception along with her now deceased sister. Once my child is born, I intend to have her committed to a private sanitarium where her condition can be treated away from public scrutiny. The child, being of my blood, will remain with me. What William Blackwood could not have anticipated was the extent of Catherine Montgomery's psychological deterioration, or the terrifying culmination of the twins' plan. On June 1st, 1895, Catherine went into labor 2 weeks earlier than expected. Dr. Whitfield was summoned to the Blackwood mansion, along with 2 nurses from the Elmwood Infirmary. What transpired during that night has been pieced together from their subsequent testimonies and written accounts. Nurse Mary Sullivan's sworn statement provides the most comprehensive account. The labor progressed normally at first, though Mrs. Blackwood was in considerable distress. What was unusual was how she kept turning her head to the side, as if listening to someone speaking to her, though there was no one there. As the labor intensified, she began to alternate between screaming in pain and laughing in a manner that chilled my blood. When the time came for the final stage of delivery, Mrs. Blackwood suddenly became completely calm. She looked directly at Dr. Whitfield and spoke in a voice unlike any I had heard from her before. She said, "We are ready now, both of us." The doctor asked who she meant by both of us, and she replied, "Eleanor and I. We will both be reborn through this vessel." Dr. Whitfield's own account continues. The delivery itself was unremarkable from a medical perspective, resulting in the birth of a healthy male child. It was what happened immediately afterward that defies rational explanation. Upon seeing her son, Mrs. Blackwood exhibited none of the usual maternal reactions. Instead, she began to speak rapidly in alternating voices, carrying on what appeared to be a conversation with herself. "Is he suitable?" she asked in one voice, followed immediately by a reply in a slightly different tone. "Yes, he will serve our purpose." Then, addressing me directly, she said, "Doctor, you must record his name correctly. He is not one child, but 2 souls in one body, just as I am now 2 sisters in one form." When I attempted to take the child from her for cleaning and examination, she became violently agitated, insisting that the joining was not yet complete. What happened next is documented in the most clinical terms in Dr. Whitfield's report, though the nurses' testimonies provide more emotional detail of the horrifying scene. Catherine Montgomery Blackwood, still holding her newborn son, suddenly bit down on her own tongue with such force that she nearly severed it. As blood filled her mouth, she smiled at the assembled medical personnel and, in a grotesque spray of crimson, whispered, "The circle is complete. We are one family now, forever joined." Before anyone could intervene, She had smeared her blood across the infant's face in a pattern that Nurse Sullivan would later describe as reminiscent of a star, like the birthmark that had identified Eleanor Montgomery. William Blackwood, who had been waiting anxiously outside the birthing room, burst in at the sound of the commotion. His presence seemed to trigger a final, catastrophic break in Catherine's already fragmented psyche. From Nurse Sullivan's account, Mrs. Blackwood looked at her husband with such hatred as I have never before witnessed. She clutched the blood-smeared child to her breast and said, "You tried to separate us, but you failed. We cannot be divided. Eleanor and I have transcended your limited understanding of identity. And now our essence lives on in this child, two souls in one body, just as we are now two souls in one flesh." William Blackwood's response, as recorded by multiple witnesses, was one of horror and revulsion. "My God," he exclaimed, "what have you done?" Catherine's reply would haunt everyone present for the remainder of their lives. "We have merely continued what our parents began. Did you never wonder why there were no records of the Montgomery family in Virginia? Why no one could quite recall meeting our parents? We have been practicing the art of merged identity for generations. This is merely the newest iteration of an ancient tradition. Our family does not proliferate through ordinary reproduction, but through the joining of souls." In the confusion that followed, Catherine Montgomery Blackwood, still weak from childbirth and blood loss, managed to lock herself in the room with her newborn son. By the time the door was broken down, she had opened the large window overlooking the Blackwood estate's ornamental pond. Empty-handed, she turned to face the intruders with a serene smile. "He is safe now," she said. "Beyond your reach. Our family continues." The child was nowhere to be found. An extensive search of the grounds revealed no trace of the infant. The ornamental pond was dragged multiple times, but no body was recovered. Catherine Montgomery Blackwood was taken into custody and transferred to the Missouri State Lunatic Asylum in Fulton, where she would spend the remainder of her life. From her admission records at the asylum, patient exhibits pronounced dissociative identity state, consistently referring to herself as both Catherine and Eleanor. She maintains that she and her deceased twin sister now inhabit the same body, and that they have somehow transferred this dual soul condition to her missing child. Patient refuses to disclose the location or fate of the infant. For 7 years, Catherine Montgomery Blackwood remained at the asylum, becoming known among the staff for her unsettling habit of having elaborate conversations with herself in 2 distinct voices. Then, on the exact anniversary of her son's birth, June 1st, 1902, she was found dead in her cell. The official cause of death was recorded as heart failure, but asylum staff reported unsettling details that were omitted from public records. From the private notes of Dr. Ezekiel Marlowe, chief physician at the asylum, Montgomery Blackwood's death presents several anomalies that defy medical explanation. Though her heart indeed ceased to function, the condition of her body at discovery suggests she had been dead for at least 24 hours, despite having been seen alive by multiple staff members throughout the day. More disturbing was the presence of a star-shaped mark on her inner left wrist, identical to the birthmark originally documented on her twin sister Eleanor, but which had supposedly been removed years earlier. Most inexplicable of all was the message found written on the wall behind her bed, in what preliminary analysis suggests was the patient's own blood. 2 becomes 1, becomes 2. The cycle continues. Look for the star. William Blackwood never recovered from the tragedy that had befallen his family. He abandoned the Blackwood mansion in 1897 and relocated to Europe, where he lived as a recluse until his death in 1915. The Blackwood fortune was left in trust with no clear heir, and the family name faded from prominence. The Carrington family met a similar fate. Harrison Carrington, devastated by the loss of his son and daughter-in-law, sold his business interests and retreated to a private estate in Colorado. He died in 1905, leaving his considerable wealth to various charitable organizations. The town of Elmwood itself began a slow decline after these events, as if cursed by the tragedy that had unfolded within its borders. By 1920, it had shrunk to half its former size, and today exists only as a small, unincorporated community that few Missouri residents could locate on a map. The case of the Montgomery twins might have remained nothing more than a disturbing historical footnote were it not for a series of unusual incidents that began to occur in the 1970s, incidents that suggest the horror they initiated may still be unfolding. In 1973, a young couple purchased the long-abandoned Blackwood mansion with plans to restore it as a historical landmark. During renovations, workers discovered a hidden compartment in the master bedroom containing dozens of small leather-bound books. These were initially believed to be additional journals belonging to Catherine Montgomery, but closer examination revealed something far more unsettling. From the report of Dr. Harriet Fleming, forensic linguist consulted by local authorities, the journals span a period from approximately 1895 to 1972, far beyond the lifespan of Catherine Montgomery Blackwood. More disturbing is that while the earlier entries match the handwriting samples confirmed to belong to the Montgomery twins, the writing gradually evolves over decades, yet maintains subtle characteristics that suggest a direct lineage of penmanship. It's as if the same person continued writing for nearly 80 years, with their handwriting naturally aging and evolving. The content of these journals describes what can only be called a multi-generational project of identity manipulation. References are made to vessels and transfers, along with detailed accounts of births, adoptions, and carefully orchestrated disappearances spanning nearly a century. Most disturbing are entries from the 1960s, describing the preparation of new vessels in various locations across America, including specific mentions of families with twin children who would be suitable for continuation of the work. From a journal entry dated September 12, 1968, the Mercer twins of Seattle show particular promise. At age 6, they have already developed the capacity for silent communication and report experiencing each other's physical sensations. Their parents believe this to be nothing more than the typical closeness of identical twins, but we recognize the signs of vessels ready for the next phase. Initial contact has been made through the school system. The extraction is planned for spring of 1969. Newspaper archives confirm that twin girls named Sarah and Samantha Mercer disappeared from their Seattle home in April 1969. Despite an extensive investigation, they were never found. Similar disappearances of twins, particularly identical female twins, can be traced across the country in the decades following the Montgomery Blackwood incident. While law enforcement has never officially linked these cases, the pattern is difficult to ignore. In 2002, exactly 100 years after Catherine Montgomery Blackwood's death at the asylum, a peculiar classified advertisement appeared simultaneously in newspapers across 27 states. The circle widens, the stars align, two becomes one becomes many. The Montgomery Blackwood lineage seeks its scattered children. Look to your wrist. Remember your true nature. Police investigations into the source of these advertisements reached a dead end. The payments had been made through an elaborate series of shell companies leading back to a trust established in 1895, the same year of the birth and disappearance of Catherine Montgomery Blackwood's son. Perhaps most unsettling of all are the reports that continue to emerge from Missouri's Department of Vital Statistics. Since 1950, they have documented an unusually high incidence of identical twins born in counties surrounding the former location of Elmwood. More specifically, there has been a statistically significant cluster of twins born with identical star-shaped birthmarks on their inner left wrists. From a confidential memorandum circulated within the Missouri Department of Health in 1983, the birthmark anomaly continues to present at rates defying statistical probability. Of particular concern is the pattern of these marked twins being adopted or otherwise separated from their birth families within the first year of life. Attempts to track these children through the system have been unsuccessful due to irregularities in record-keeping that suggest deliberate interference. In 2019, a genetic researcher at Washington University in St. Louis began a study of DNA samples from twins born in the region over the past 5 decades. The preliminary results, which have yet to be published or peer-reviewed, reportedly show inexplicable genetic similarities among individuals with no known familial connection, except for the presence of the star-shaped birthmark. The researcher, Dr. Melissa Chen, abruptly discontinued her study and resigned from her position at the university in 2020. Her only public statement was brief and cryptic. Some knowledge is not meant to be pursued. Some truths are too dangerous to uncover. I advise my colleagues to look elsewhere for research subjects. Attempts to locate Dr. Chen have been unsuccessful. Today, the former site of Elmwood, Missouri is largely reclaimed by forest. The foundations of the Blackwood and Carrington mansions are still visible to those who know where to look, slowly being consumed by vegetation. Local residents avoid the area, particularly after dark, claiming to hear the sounds of women's voices engaged in whispered conversation and occasionally the cry of an infant that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The story of the Montgomery twins represents more than just a historical curiosity or a tragic tale of mental illness and deception. It raises profound questions about the nature of identity, the bonds between twins, and the lengths to which disturbed minds might go to transcend the limitations of individual consciousness. More chillingly, it suggests the possibility that their twisted legacy continues to unfold in ways we have yet to fully comprehend. If the journals found in the Blackwood mansion are to be believed, the Montgomery Blackwood lineage has spread across America, perpetuating itself through the systematic identification, abduction, and indoctrination of twins who show signs of the psychological merger the original sisters believed themselves to embody. How many individuals today might be unwitting participants in this century-old horror? How many families have been infiltrated by those bearing the star-shaped mark that signifies membership in this disturbing collective? And what is the ultimate goal of this multi-generational project of identity subversion? Perhaps most troubling of all is the possibility that the Montgomery twins achieved exactly what they set out to do, creating a legacy that transcends individual identity and continues to spread like a slow-moving infection through the bloodlines of America. If you notice a star-shaped birthmark on someone's inner left wrist, particularly on a twin, proceed with extreme caution. The person you are looking at may not be who or what they appear to be. Should you encounter someone with such a marking who takes an unusual interest in twins or identity, or who speaks of themselves alternately as I and we, do not engage. Report the encounter to local authorities, but be aware that, if the journals are correct, the influence of the Montgomery Blackwood lineage may extend into institutions of power throughout the country. This darkness that began in 1894 in a small Missouri town continues to cast its shadow over our present day. The twins' deception, marrying wealthy heirs under switched identities, was merely the first step in a plan that spans generations and continues to unfold in ways we can barely comprehend. As you go about your day, look carefully at the identical twins you encounter. Watch how they interact. Listen to how they speak about themselves and each other. And remember that sometimes, what appears to be two distinct individuals may in reality be something far more disturbing, two bodies housing a single, divided consciousness that seeks, above all else, to multiply and spread. Turn to God and Jesus Christ for protection against such evils that walk among us. Only through faith can we hope to stand against the darkness that has been growing in the shadows of our society for over a century. The Montgomery legacy continues. The star-bearers walk among us, and they are always watching for suitable vessels to continue their work. The investigation into the Montgomery Blackwood case remained dormant for decades, filed away as a bizarre historical tragedy. However, in 1984, a series of discoveries brought the horror back into focus with disturbing new implications. Detective Samuel Lowenstein of the Missouri State Police Historical Crimes Division had developed an obsession with the case after discovering a family connection. His great-grandfather had been one of the officers who searched the Blackwood estate for the missing infant. While examining previously sealed evidence in the state archives, Lowenstein discovered something that had been overlooked by the original investigators. From Lowenstein's case notes, dated March 17, 1984, the Montgomery journals contain references to a location described only as the nursery. Initially assumed to be a room within the Blackwood mansion, closer analysis suggests it was a separate facility entirely. Multiple entries mention transfers to the nursery and vessels being prepared at the nursery. Most significant is a hand-drawn map tucked between pages of the final journal, showing a location approximately 30 miles southwest of Elmwood. Lowenstein obtained permission to investigate the site, which was now part of Mark Twain National Forest. What he found there would force authorities to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the Montgomery twins. From Lowenstein's official report, the structure itself had largely succumbed to decay, but the root cellar remained intact. Inside, we discovered evidence of what can only be described as a medical facility far beyond the technological capabilities of the 1890s. Surgical implements of unusual design were found alongside glass containers of unknown purpose. Most disturbing were the detailed records discovered in a sealed metal box, preserved despite the passage of time. These records documented what appears to have been a multi-generational experiment in what the authors termed consciousness transference. Entries dating from 1895 to 1978 detail procedures performed on sets of twins brought to the facility. The clinical language cannot disguise the horror of what was being attempted, the deliberate fragmentation and merger of identities across multiple subjects. The records confirmed what had previously seemed impossible. The Montgomery Blackwood lineage had indeed continued long after Catherine's death, operating in secret through a network of disciples committed to what they called the great work of unification. Most disturbing were photographs found among the documents, showing sets of twins, usually female, with identical star-shaped markings on their wrists. These markings were not birthmarks as originally believed, but deliberately created scars, part of a ritual induction into what the records referred to as the Star family. From a document titled Protocols of Succession, dated 1938, the essence of the founders must be preserved through each generation. When a suitable vessel reaches maturity, the transfer ritual must be performed at precisely the correct astronomical alignment. The elder consciousness moves forward into the prepared vessel, while the younger serves as anchor to this realm. In this way, our family transcends the limitations of mortality. Forensic analysis of the facility revealed something even more shocking. Evidence that it had been actively used until approximately 1981, just 3 years before its discovery. The most recent logbook entry, dated November 12, 1981, contained this cryptic note: "Final transition complete. The Missouri nursery is no longer required. Operations transferring to the Seattle facility per Protocol 17. Lowenstein immediately attempted to coordinate with Seattle authorities, but bureaucratic delays hampered his efforts. By the time a search warrant was obtained for the suspected location, an abandoned sanitarium outside Seattle, the facility had been completely cleared out." From Lowenstein's personal journal, found after his death, "I am now convinced that what began with the Montgomery twins was never simply a case of shared delusion or identity confusion. They were the first documented members of something much older and more widespread, a network of individuals who believe they can achieve immortality through the manipulation and transference of consciousness." The star marking is key. It signifies not just membership in this group, but marks those who have undergone what they call the joining. My research has uncovered similar cases dating back centuries across cultures, twins who claim to house multiple consciousnesses, who practiced elaborate rituals of identity exchange, who bore the same distinctive marking. I now believe the Montgomery twins themselves were products of this system rather than its originators. Their fixation on the Blackwood and Carrington families was strategic. They sought not just wealth, but genetic lines with certain characteristics, particularly a history of twin births and unusual psychic sensitivity. Lowenstein's investigation came to an abrupt end on June 1, 1985, the anniversary of both the birth of Catherine Montgomery's son and her eventual death. He was found in his home office, surrounded by case files. The official cause of death was ruled a heart attack, but colleagues noted disturbing inconsistencies. From the statement of Officer James Merrick, Sam's body was sitting too perfectly at his desk, like it had been arranged. His expression was wrong too, almost peaceful with this strange little smile. And there was something on his wrist that wasn't mentioned in the official report, a small star-shaped mark that looked freshly carved into his skin. When I tried to point this out to the medical examiner, he looked at me like I was crazy and said there was no such mark. After Lowenstein's death, the case once again faded from official attention. His files were archived, his theories dismissed as the product of an overactive imagination. But the reports of missing twins continued, as did the statistical anomaly of children born with star-shaped birthmarks. In 2014, a doctoral student at Johns Hopkins University named Rebecca Chen, no relation to Dr. Melissa Chen of Washington University, began researching historical cases of twins with unusual psychological profiles for her dissertation on shared psychosis. Her research led her to the Montgomery Blackwood case and Lowenstein's discredited investigation. Unlike previous researchers, Chen approached the case from a perspective informed by recent advances in neurological science and twin studies. What she discovered suggested that the Montgomery delusion might have had a biological basis previously unrecognized by science. From Chen's dissertation, published in 2016, recent studies of monozygotic twins reveal instances of neurological connection far beyond what conventional science has acknowledged. Cases of shared sensory experience, synchronized brain activity at a distance, and even instances of apparent thought transference have been documented but largely dismissed due to their challenge to established neurological paradigms. The Montgomery case, when viewed through the lens of emergent research on consciousness and quantum brain functions, suggests the possibility that certain twin pairs may indeed develop forms of consciousness that transcend individual neural boundaries. While this does not validate the extreme measures taken by the individuals involved, it raises profound questions about our understanding of consciousness as necessarily confined to a single brain. Chen's academic career was promising but short-lived. After presenting her work at a neuroscience conference in 2017, she disappeared while traveling to a follow-up symposium in Switzerland. Her belongings were found in her hotel room, including her laptop and passport, but no trace of Chen herself has ever been discovered. A single entry in her digital journal, recovered from cloud storage, has fueled speculation about her fate. "I've been contacted by someone claiming to be a descendant of the Star family. They say they want to show me evidence that will validate my theories, meeting them tomorrow at the location they specified." This could change everything we understand about twin consciousness. The most recent development in this century-old mystery occurred just last year when an anonymous package was delivered to the Missouri State Historical Society. It contained a collection of photographs spanning from 1900 to 2024, each showing an individual or pair of individuals with a star-shaped marking on their inner left wrist. Most disturbing was a family portrait, dated 2023, showing a couple with identical twin daughters, approximately 6 years old, each bearing the distinctive mark. The location appeared to be a modern, upscale home, suggesting the continuation of the Star family into the present day. Accompanying the photographs was a handwritten note: "The Montgomery Blackwood lineage thrives. What began as two has become many. We are legion now living among you, expanding our collective consciousness with each generation. Some of us hold positions of significant influence in government, medicine, technology, education. We identify potential vessels early and bring them into our family. The great work continues as it has for centuries before the Montgomerys and will for centuries after. This package is our gift to you, a glimpse behind the veil. By the time you understand what you're seeing, it will be too late to stop what has already been set in motion. Look around you. We are your neighbors, your colleagues, your children's teachers. We are the pediatricians who first examine your newborn twins, the administrators who process adoption records, the judges who decide custody cases. The star marks our family, but not all who bear it display it visibly. We are everywhere, working toward the day when the division between minds will dissolve completely. The Montgomery sisters were merely two early practitioners of what will ultimately transform human consciousness itself. Law enforcement agencies consulted on the package determined there was insufficient evidence to launch a formal investigation, despite the implied threat contained in the message. The photographs and note were archived as historical curiosities, likely the work of someone with an unhealthy obsession with the original case. But for those who have studied the Montgomery Blackwood history closely, the implications are far more disturbing. If the contents of the package are genuine, they suggest the existence of a multi-generational conspiracy that has operated in secret for well over a century, expanding its influence and perfecting its methods of consciousness manipulation. The statistical anomalies continue, unexplained disappearances of twins, particularly those who demonstrate unusual psychic connections, the birth of children with star-shaped marks in geographic clusters that shift over time, and perhaps most disturbing, the emergence of individuals in positions of influence who demonstrate unusual psychological profiles consistent with the merged consciousness described in the Montgomery journals. There are rumors in certain psychiatric circles of patients who present with multiple fully developed personalities that do not fit the standard diagnostic criteria for dissociative identity disorder. personalities that claim to be much older than the physical body they inhabit, that demonstrate knowledge they could not possibly possess, that refer to themselves as vessels for consciousness that has existed for generations. What began in 1894 with twin sisters who married wealthy heirs under switched identities may have been merely the first documented case of something that predates and will outlast our current understanding of human consciousness. The Montgomery deception, calculated, meticulous, and ultimately successful despite its discovery, may represent just one visible manifestation of a phenomenon that continues to spread through our society like a shadow network, hidden in plain sight. If you encounter an individual with a star-shaped marking who takes an unusual interest in twins or speaks of consciousness in terms of vessels and transference, exercise extreme caution. They may be connected to what began with the Montgomery sisters and has evolved into something far more extensive and powerful. The true horror of the Montgomery Blackwood case is not what happened in that small Missouri town over a century ago, but what may be happening all around us today, a patient, generations-long project to transform human consciousness itself, one set of twins at a time. As this darkness continues to spread unseen through our society, remember that only through faith in God and Jesus Christ can we find protection against such evil. When faced with horrors that transcend our understanding, divine guidance remains our strongest shield. Turn to prayer and community in these uncertain times, for some battles cannot be fought alone. The star-bearers walk among us, and their work is not yet complete.